My guest today is David Linakar. Born and brought up on the Isle of Wight, David suffered early bereavement at age 4 when his mother died from ovarian cancer. After a disrupted upbringing, he began work in retail banking at 18, but at 30 became an Anglican priest. After the collapse of his marriage and the loss of his faith in 2016, David was forced to reassess and reshape his inner life. He's now married to Jane and successfully co-parents his daughter with his former wife, Karen. He runs a successful life coaching and celebrancy business from his home in Salisbury. So welcome to the show, David. How lovely to have you here. How are you?
Thank you, Madeleine. It's really, really good to be here. I'm extremely well, thank you.
So the very first question I always ask everyone that comes on as a guest is, what does the word unbroken mean to you?
The honest answer is it means a journey. It means a journey towards a sense of wholeness. And I think that's a lifelong journey.
Yeah. And you have been on a journey, as we said in the bio, just at age 4, you were faced with a huge trauma of losing your mum.
I think the more that I've spent time working with therapists, the more I realize that actually it predates that, because my mother had only given birth to a stillborn older brother of mine just 9 months before I was conceived. So I mean, I guess these were in the days when a doctor would say, you know, off you go, my girl, go and have another go. But it's pretty clear that the grief and the mess and the chaos of that really hadn't settled in any way, shape or form by the time I arrived. And so it was already, I think, quite an anxious household. And then I arrived, and within 2 years of my arrival, my mother was already unwell and was formally diagnosed when I was about 3.5. I was a priest for 21 years, add on to that period of training, so it was 25 years essentially. And I had a great time, and I met some amazing people, and I had some fantastic opportunities. But really, by the time I was sort of partway through my last job, I knew that intellectually, me and the church were parting company. And that's not to say that I don't have a deep spirituality. I do, I think. But I wasn't able quite to tick the boxes that were required to be a uniformed representative of the organization. We'll come on to the personal stuff in a moment, because I think you know it's useful to just dig out what was going on.
Yeah.
So I was becoming really concerned about the way in which the church was becoming much more hardline in its views on particular issues, and homosexuality became a real touchstone of that. I had friends who were gay, and I found the way that the church was speaking about that and treating certain gay clergy was appalling. They
were rejecting them. They didn't want them to be part of the church.
Rejecting, using forked tongue kind of words, where they would say, "Oh yes, you know, we welcome the person, but reject the sin," kind of thing, and that was all pretty difficult. I'd also arrived in a job which meant that I was quite close to a local centre of power, and that's where you see the church behaving badly. You know, Anthony Trollope was alive and well and living in Salisbury. So, you know, I saw stuff that I didn't like. And then in the autumn of 2015, I was invited to go with a group of other ministers to Yad Vashem in Jerusalem. And I think doing some very intensive study on Christian anti-Semitism, and on the Holocaust.
My father was actually a Holocaust survivor, so I know that museum very well, and I know the stories very well.
And they have, alongside the museum, they have a university level faculty for study and research. And we were privileged to sit at the feet of some amazing people. But by the end of that, I actually knew that the game was up intellectually. I couldn't hold those two things in tension anymore. Now, at the same time, my wife and I had been married for some time, and we eventually produced a daughter.
Produced a daughter. It sounds like you just popped down to the shops and produced a daughter.
we went to the daughter shop and got ourselves
what a fine
a baby.
specimen, yes.
And the process of that flushed out a whole load of stuff which was hidden really from one another. And I don't want to go into too much detail because this is my wife's territory as much as mine, or my former wife's territory as much as mine, and it's not for me to put all that stuff out in public. However, the upshot was that we both behaved in ways which meant that the marriage was unsustainable. So in the summer of 2015, a kind of chasm opened up underneath me into which I fell. And to be honest, the kind of the building of that particular hell had been in construction for the previous 52 years.
It was waiting the moment for the cracks to appear.
And I kind of, I think a lot about Nietzsche's thing about gazing into the abyss, and the abyss gazes back. And I think that was the point where the abyss opened up and I just looked in and fell. And then you kind of wait for the thump as you hit the bottom. And that probably happened during August of 2016, I guess. But I remember a friend of mine at theological college reporting a conversation he'd once had with a nun who'd said to him, "Oh, if you've never had a breakdown, I do recommend one." And I'd always thought that was a slightly mad thing to say.
But actually, on your website, you do say a time of crisis is a time of decision. So once you hit rock bottom, the only way is up, really, isn't it? And
absolutely,
all the stuff we've avoided, kept ourselves busy from looking at, they all come forward. And, eventually I think we do have to face everything,
And I think one of the issues was that the church, in a sense, attempted to be kind in the way that they ended my time in ministry. The problem was that they confused niceness and kindness. And as a result, there was an ambiguity about the way in which the congregation had been told what was happening to me. And that meant that truthfulness was a casualty around that. And I knew that...
As in they were too honest with your personal issues, or they didn't tell the truth?
We were essentially institutionally dishonest. We said that I had a sort of overwhelm and breakdown and needed to leave, rather than actually what would have happened under a disciplinary thing, where I would have been disciplined for having broken the rules and been out on my ear. I'd read an article that was in the Harvard Business Review some years ago, which had said there are 3 elements to resilience. Accept what's happened and accept it quickly. Find meaning in what's happened, and then engage in what they call bricolage. So you look at the whole horizon of everything you've got and all the tools that are in the toolbox and say, right, okay, let's mix all this up and see what happens. And that was the route back. And then as soon as I was able to be open and honest with some really key people who I knew could help, they were then really good in helping me to understand what I was able to bring to the party. So very quickly, I basically ended up taking with me from the church the 2 things that I most enjoyed. So helping people with ritual to mark key moments of their lives, and working with people in their personal development. So those
Which
two
is
things.
now why you're a celebrant and a life coach.
Yes.
Yeah. And just for people to be clear, you obviously were a priest, but to be a celebrant, do you have to be a member of the clergy, or no, you don't? But so you're a double whammy. You've got both skills there.
For good or ill, it's a completely unregulated industry. Anyone can turn up and be a celebrant. But of course, with 25 years worth of background, it does mean that because I do mostly funeral work, it means that I'm a relatively safe pair of hands for funeral directors. And I tend to end up working with some of the more complex ones because funeral directors know I can cope. Enjoy being you. Look back down the timeline and value the sunshine and the laughter, but also realize that the true treasure lies in the struggle and the pain. That's where the gold is to be found.
That was the word I'm thinking is the alchemy. The gold is just, as you were saying.
It absolutely is. That's the true alchemy, because out of that comes the courage. And as a very good friend of mine who suffered a very serious spinal injury would say, what's the point of asking why me? Why not me?
Yes, absolutely.
And maybe this is my vocation.
Yeah, I think that is a perfect place to end. So, David, it just leaves me to thank you so much for coming on my podcast show. It's been a delight to speak to you and wish you all the best.
Thank you for having me.